if you are looking to implement this model and you do need staff, then you need to make sure that they're hospitable. 11 Madison Park didn't get to 3 Michelin stars by hiring a guy who was looking for work experience, who just wanted a job for the summer. The quote that Guidara says is, "We were looking for the kind of person who runs after a stranger on the street to return a dropped scarf, who stops by with a plate of cookies to welcome a new family to the neighborhood, or who offers to help carry a stranger's heavy stroller up the subway stairs. The kind of truly hospitable person, in other words, who wants to do good things, not for financial gain or some kind of karmic bump, but because the idea of bestowing graciousness upon others makes their own day better." And that's exactly what you were saying, Jacob, is you couldn't help yourself from being hospitable. It's just in your blood, and that's the kind of staff that, if you're trying to implement this model, that you need to be finding. And to me, it sounds like you need to apply for a job from Will Guidara, Jacob, from what you just said.
No, I mean, I just ran out the numbers, right? If you feel like it's going to cost $5 extra more from a salary employee standpoint to retain that person, that is that person for your company, to go attract it, it's $10,400 on your labor costs without labor assumption. So let's just say it's 22% carry on like insurance and workers' comp, so it's about $13,000. And then look at how much you've refunded and how much you've given back, or how much you've comped in the future, and then tell me that cost analysis for that person. So this just like speaks to my core about retention and employment and hiring practices. I think Mendocino Grove hit this out of the park. I mean, we paid a premium knowing that we were a seasonal employee, so that our housekeeping team, our groundskeeper, our maintenance guys, our front office, our camp, I really felt like that brand did so good at taking care of their people in that way. But it's only because we could run the numbers on it. And I'm like, what's the alternate? Please tell, like, have these earnest conversations with the ownership team. I said, because let me show you the math on this emotional decision.
I think, going from the world of e-commerce, and it's kind of taking a similar idea, like when you brought in the people that, especially in the customer support world, like, hey, the ones that are going to engage your customers, like when you brought in people that had an understanding and empathy, but also gave them a little bit of autonomy to make things move, like the amounts of chargebacks and returns for an e-commerce company are so drastically less than when you just provide a service. Or if you find different ways in that world of just caring a little bit more and they feel heard, like your drastic numbers in returns and then repurchases is so wildly higher that it's like, yes, it's worth that person or worth that service or worth that budget, because that little budget is going to save you and all this other expenses that could come down the line.
Yeah, Nathan, obviously Seth and Tori at Bolt Farm have a very public profile. They are Bolt Farm Treehouse for a lot of people. And they really will set high expectations for their guests, that they will be looked after and it'll be really hospitable because of the stuff they say and they do on their social media. So presumably it was pretty important that you could find staff to actually implement that to the levels that guests came in expecting.
Yeah, I mean, when you have the social following that you do and you kind of set the standard before they show up, you have to meet it. And so I think that's in this world of like social media, and we do have the Kristen Calavaris and celebrities showing up and posting about it. Like, and you just have that expectation. Like, the expectation is to meet what the guests had in their mind before they showed up, right? And not just to meet it, to exceed it. And that's where the hospitality comes in, because people already have their expectations of the amazing view and the amazing amenities. So what's going to take that? It's going to be how they feel cared for and the experience they have. And so it took and that's kind of where you can feel know that was being done, because you look at the reviews and people are like, all right, they are being taken care of in a way that they feel that it's a 5-star. But yeah, and almost there's more pressure if you're going to have the beautiful, sexy social media brand, because you have to live up to that. And I think you live up to it by doing that's the way Bolt Farm did. I know, like you said, some brands are going the opposite of people, but you mentioned that, like, I still think there's ways you can take the idea of unreasonable hospitality into a non-contacted resort that makes the guest still feel a little bit more one size fits one.
Yeah, Ben would argue that. Ben would argue that he's got enough customer service
Yeah.
reps on retainer that at any point he can coordinate communication from the back end to make it happen.
That is actually one thing that I remember. I remember speaking to him probably over a year ago now. And this is Ben Wolf of Venera, by the way. He was on a couple of weeks ago, board member at Posh Outdoors. Wink, wink. And I think their aim basically was if a prospective guest made an inquiry on their website, that they would get a reply like instantly. And they do that by having a lot of staff on retainer in the Philippines, as Jacob mentioned. And yeah, I suppose that is a form of hospitality, is making it feel like you're going to get an instant response and that you're being heard, rather than having to wait 2 days to find out if you're allowed to bring a dog, for example.
Yeah, and he's allocating resources to that to get the best customer service. But I mean, I think it is a big part of the theme of the book is to take care of your people, right? And that's your employees and that's your guests. And like that should be a core, lesson to building.
Presumably, well, before we go into taking care of the people, back to finding people, Jacob, you will presumably interviewed a lot of people trying to be hired in these hospitable roles as you're the GM. What were you looking for, and what did you find that went translated from the interview process and the job application to an actual really good member of staff who did have those principles of hospitality and applied them?
Yeah, great question, Nick. It's like, I think when you feel like you're really tuned into what the brand is, you kind of, it's like,
Yeah.
type of feeling, right? Like honestly, my interview process is pretty boring because I'd rather just have a casual conversation with someone and kind of just pick up on some small cues, right? Like how good are the active listening skills? Also, are they courageous enough to cut you off a bit? Like, because I want some stakeholding, so I'm looking for cues of like natural stakeholding, and person's pride and level of their personal pride should translate to their pride of work, right? So examples of that in their interviewing process, I try to look for. Also, it's just like, if the better the employee knows themselves, the better the employee is going to be for you. And I think that in my personal career trajectory, that's maybe where I failed, right? Where I'm like still growing and learning a little bit about who I was as a leader in my early 20s. It probably wasn't an appropriate time, to be going through those learning cycles and leading a company, right? But I was given a lot of grace. But I think that those are two things that I really look for, is like, how well does that person know themselves, right? And how comfortable are they with themselves? And then are they giving you cues of stakeholding or pride? And you could do a lot with those two pieces.
So when you say knowing themselves, do you mean you like knowing their own strengths and weaknesses and their communication methods and all of that?
Yeah, and I think just knowing what to share, what not to share. Also being very clear and transparent about, hey, honestly, I'm a morning person, right? And I know this interview is a PM job. So like, just don't apply for the PM job if you know your peak hours of performance are from 6 to 11, right? Like, I think physiologically that's important to know, a circadian rhythm, a life rhythm. Yeah, I think just being aware and projecting into the future, right? Like, oh, I know that my family goes on vacation in October every year. If someone says that to me in an interview, I'm like, thank you. You know yourself, you know your rhythm, you know your calendar. I can work with that. So I think those are some examples.